Your Secretary of State says everyone who's here, citizens and non-citizens, deserve due process. Do you agree, Mr. President?
I don't know. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know.
Well, the Fifth Amendment says
I don't know.
as
It might say that.
Don't you need to uphold the Constitution of the United States as president?
I don't know. I have to respond by saying again, I have brilliant lawyers that work for me, and they are going to obviously follow what the Supreme Court said.
Aren't you in charge of the Constitution? Can I use a lifeline on that? I don't know. Hi again, everybody. It's 5 o'clock in New York. Since he, in his own words, quote, doesn't know the answer, we will answer it for him. Yes, the Fifth Amendment to the United States Constitution, it's up there on your screen, says everyone deserves due process. And in the case of the more than 100 Venezuelan men this administration deported to a maximum security prison in El Salvador back in March after invoking the Alien Enemies Act by saying there was an invasion from Trinidad, that there wasn't. A judge just ruled that due process must be followed for those men. In a new 69-page ruling, Judge Boasberg ordered the government to give those men that it deported the chance to explain to a judge why they should not be detained. The judge writing this, quote, defendants plainly deprived these individuals of their rights to seek habeas relief before their summary removal from the U.S., a right that need not itself be vindicated through a habeas petition. Perhaps the president lawfully invoked the Alien Enemies Act. Perhaps, moreover, defendants are correct that plaintiffs are gang members, but, and this is the critical point, there is simply no way to know for sure, as the CCOP plaintiffs never had any opportunity to challenge the government's say-so. Judge Boasberg goes on to say that the Trump administration instead, quote, spirited away plane loads of people before any such challenge could be made. And now significant evidence has come to light, indicating that many of those currently entombed in CCOT have no connection to the gang and thus languish in a foreign prison on flimsy, even frivolous accusations. The judge's ruling provides a glimmer of hope to the plaintiffs. Their lead lawyer for the ACLU, Lee Gallant, saying this, quote, the court correctly held that the government cannot send people to a brutal foreign prison without any due process and then decline all responsibility to remedy the blatant constitutional violation. And the New York Times writes this, quote, in many ways, Judge Boasberg's ruling raised as many questions as it answered. While he told the administration that it must facilitate the ability of the men being detained in El Salvador, quote, to contest their removal under the Alien Enemies Act, he put off for the moment the thorny issue of what such facilitation must entail. That is where we start the hour with some of our favorite experts and friends. Immigration attorney and former president of the American Immigration Lawyers Association, Alan Orr, is back. With me at the table, MSNBC legal analyst, former SDNY Criminal Division Deputy Chief, Christy Greenberg's back, and former Republican Congressman David Jolly's here. Today he announced he's running for governor of Florida. We'll cover that story in a minute, but we start with this one. Alan Orr, take me inside Judge Boasberg's ruling.
I think that it's a very forceful ruling, and it's not just Judge Boasberg. It's the Supreme Court, and 4 other district courts have said that due process was entitled to all these individuals who were removed. Even Mr. Garcia's case, which was in another court, said that due process should be held. And so the answer is, what are they going to do about it? Because in Mr. Garcia's case, which he's been there since March, we've already understood that due process was entailed, that it was a mistake, and what they're going to do about it. And it is not until June 11th of this year that the court's going to actually start hearing Rule 11 judgments against the government with regard to the mishandling of this case. So the problem is, what will the executive branch do with this judge's order? Because so far, they've just been kicking the can down the road.
Let me read you more, Christy, from Judge Boasberg's ruling. Quote, defendants must facilitate plaintiffs' ability to proceed through habeas and ensure that their cases are handled as they would have been if the government had not provided constitutionally inadequate process. The court determines that such a remedy balances the defendant's distinct role in conducting foreign affairs with the grave need to right their legal wrongs. Absent this relief, the government could snatch anyone off the street, turn him over to a foreign country, and then effectively foreclose any corrective course of action. Aren't we there? Almost?
I mean, the fact that the government's position in this case was, well, we no longer have custody of these people. They're gone. They didn't get any process. They don't deny that they didn't get any process, and that they're fine with that. Yeah, it feels like we're already there. I mean, you have a judge that is opening this 69-page opinion by referencing Kafka. You have the hearings prior to this where an appellate judge said Nazis got treated better. I mean, this isn't judges gone wild like you would maybe believe if you listen to other networks. I mean, these are judges who are very careful, very thoughtful, and they're not coming to these statements lightly. Due process matters. People have to have an opportunity to be able to come before a judge and say, I'm not a member of this vicious gang. You can't just send me off to a foreign gulag for the rest of my life and throw away the key. Like that's not how it works here. And so, look, this is a good opinion, but yes, the question is what happens now? How is it that you get this class of individuals real process in that foreign prison? How do they have access to lawyers? What does that look like? Do their lawyers get to meet with them in person? Do they have to have phone calls? Are they limited in those contexts? I mean, what this actually looks like, I think, is very much up in the air. And the judge said, I'm waiting for the government's proposal. I mean, the government has taken the position like 12 hours of notice is just fine. You know, one call with your lawyer is just fine. I mean, even when they talk about due process, they don't talk about it in ways that are really meaningful. So we will see how this shakes out, but it is a good, helpful sign from the judge.
I used this term yesterday in the context of Lutnick. I'm going to use it 2 days in a row in the context of Kristi Noem. I am not ignorance shaming her, but she is responsible for the lives of these men and does not know what habeas corpus means. Let me show you where she reveals that to the judge, to the men involved, and to the country.
Secretary Noem, what is habeas corpus?
Well, habeas corpus is a constitutional right that the president has to be able to remove people from this country and suspend their right to.
Let me stop you, ma'am. Habeas
right
corpus, excuse me, that's incorrect.
President
habeas
Lincoln
corpus,
used it.
Excuse me. Habeas corpus is the legal principle that requires that the government provide a public reason for detaining and imprisoning people. If not for that protection, the government could simply arrest people, including American citizens, and hold them indefinitely for no reason. Habeas corpus is the foundational right that separates free societies like America from police states like North Korea.
You've got that happening in public. Proud of not knowing the answer to that question. You've got Donald Trump, again, publicly telling my colleague Kristen Welker, I don't know if the Constitution is my thing.
Look, I think it's hard to have a national conversation around this because the challenge is human behavior is such that if a crime doesn't occur in your neighborhood, maybe you don't feel threatened. If the suspension of habeas or due process doesn't happen to you and your community, maybe you don't care as much as you should. And I think we have to start conversations around this, recognizing that due process and habeas are there to protect the innocent. They're not just there to protect those, those who ultimately are adjudicated as guilty. They're there to protect the innocent. And when due process and habeas are suspended, you end up picking up people who are innocent. And so maybe half the country, the MAGA wing of the country, whatever that is fine with Kristi Noem's answer, but we need to insist that others are not. And I think it reflects a darker heart in some of the immigration policies of the Trump administration. I suppose Secretary Noem, I've been talking a lot about the fact that I think Republicans wrongly fight communities and not crime. And they've gotten away with conflating crime and immigration for too long. I think we have to make sure we have a public conversation that decouples immigration and crime and recognizes that what Donald Trump is doing is he's attacking communities, he's fighting communities, and he's going to look for crime. And what it's doing is it's sweeping up a lot of innocent people. And what we should be doing is the inverted. Go find crime. And it doesn't matter if they were born here or if they were immigrated here or what their way of life is. If they commit a crime, then you go get them. That is not Trump's immigration policy. It's certainly not Secretary Noem's.
Well, and that's where he's sort of perverting these venerable institutions. The reason the FBI is being dismantled and put into a different configuration is the FBI is built to find and investigate and prevent crimes. They're dismantling that and putting them on immigration cases.
Yeah, and we should all be horrified by the level of ignorance of Secretary Noem, of maybe Kash Patel, of others who are willing to administer Donald Trump's direction in this area. I mean, at least the traditions of executive authority and the department offices where there was some check on these types of violations and abuse of power. But if you don't even understand the Constitution, how should we have confidence that Kristi Noem knows how to stop the president going in this direction? It appears in her sheer ignorance she's willing to execute on these violations of basic fundamental rules of due process and habeas.
Where do you think she was going with when she starts to say Lincoln? What was?
You know, look, there's a bell curve in politics. Not everybody's the smartest tool in the shed, I suppose, and I think we're seeing that in evidence in Trump's cabinet.
I want to dig in a little bit to something that David's talking about. I think there's a bet that the fever that swept the Republican convention, where everyone waved mass deportation now signs around, has broken, not from the numbers. The polling has shown since the beginning that there's 9, 12, and I think 11% support from the American people for deporting people that have been here for decades, that have jobs, or that have kids that are born here, respectively. I think better than the numbers, though, are the stories. And this is the story of Carol. It's going to take me a second, but I want to read this to our viewers from the New York Times. Quote, an immigrant waitress from Hong Kong whose looming deportation brought home the reality of President Trump's immigration crackdown to her conservative Missouri hometown was freed on Wednesday after more than a month in jail. Carol Hui, who was born in Hong Kong, entered the United States 20 years ago on a short-term tourist visa and stayed long past its expiration in the process of building a life, having 3 children, and becoming a beloved waitress serving waffles and hugs to the breakfast crowd. The public outrage and backlash to her arrest was remarkable in a town like Kennett, the seat of a rural county where 80% of the voters supported Trump last November, and where many voters said they supported his promises of mass deportations. But many in Kennett said Ms. Hui should not have been apprehended. To them, she was not a gang member or criminal alien. She was a mother of 3 they talked with at soccer and Little League games, who served them waffles and egg skillets, who cleaned houses as a side job, and went to Sunday Mass at the local Catholic church. Alan?
Yeah, it's all a protection racket, and this is a shatter in the window so people can see what he's actually protecting you from Carol, the waitress, from the honor student, the high school student, from the individuals helping to build the projects in Tallahassee and Tennessee, from people who are going to work. These are not the criminals that he promised you that he was going to remove from the United States. And once America starts to wake up and see that this protection racket, this promise of saving you from something that doesn't exist, and the financial cost, I want people to weigh more into the numbers and the amount of money that's being used to detain Carol, with 6 officers showing up at a restaurant to detain her, or the number of people who pulled over the car to arrest the student. All those things are cost on the taxpayer, as well as the detention of those students who have nothing to sort of fear or no threat to the United States at all in the many years they've been in the United States. The financial cost outweighs everything. And when we remember what American exceptionalism is, we talk about habeas and due process. Those are the things that made us the beacon on the hill, that said, this is the country I want to come to because the rules are the same for everyone. And what we're seeing right now, not just the dismantling of these things, but the dismantling of the whole bright light that we used to have. The travel ban and everything else in immigration speaks to the nation that we said that we were not going to be.
Yeah, and people have been, Kristi, in my personal opinion, slow to wake up to that and a little timid politically to stand up to that. But it feels like something's turning with some of the stories coming out. I want to show you something Sheryl Crow posted on Instagram. It's a Bring Carol Home shirt. And she writes, I don't have the answers. All I know is there are a lot of Carols in every small town in America right now. Good people who are living in this country, who are paying their taxes and raising their kids and contributing to their communities, and who are involved in their churches, and whose kids are terrified that their mothers or their fathers are not coming home. Perhaps our public servants could address easier paths forward for those who have lived here for decades, paying taxes and contributing to their communities, as opposed to dehumanizing them and referring to them as rapists, drug dealers, and criminals.
Look, I think David said it best. Crime and immigration aren't necessarily the same conversation, and there is a way to deal with people who are in this country illegally, who have committed real crimes. And the person who dealt with that was President Obama. He deported a number of criminals, and I know I was in the Department of Justice at that time as a new prosecutor. My docket was largely those cases. I didn't necessarily love having those cases on my docket, but that was a priority of that administration. He did it the right way. There is a way to go about doing this. If somebody's committed a crime, you have a criminal case and you go forward. These aren't criminal cases. These are civil immigration violations. Carol has not committed a crime to anybody's knowledge. She has no criminal history. And there are so many like her that don't. And so when you have these conversations to just scare people that there are all these people swarming into the country who have committed crimes, it is the job of prosecutors and the Department of Justice to prove that they have committed a crime. And they can't, seemingly can't, because they don't want to go through the process. If they had all this evidence, presumably they would be showing us the evidence. That's what we do. That's what you would do as a prosecutor. But they don't. So they short circuit it and they want to find all these shortcuts to just, get people out of the country and say, oops, no longer in our custody, nothing we can do. And that is not, again, how things should be done. And, hopefully, again, judges are able to continue to hold the line against that.
Well, I mean, you talked about decoupling crime and immigration. I mean, the other thing is to decouple what the public supports and does not support.
Sure.
89% of Americans in a New York Times Siena poll support deporting adjudicated violent criminals.
Sure.
Adjudicated. They do not support, I mean, if the numbers go down to 9 to 15% of Americans who support deporting people like Carol, people who've been in this country for years, had their kids here, have jobs here, are part of their communities. The other response to the judges and the legal is political.
It is political, and it will be interesting what the nation chooses to do in this moment, because we're really holding a mirror up to ourselves and our national values. What are those national values? Carol should be welcome here, celebrated. She should be lifted up. She's exactly somebody that we want to come to the United States to contribute, to be a part of this country, and I'm guessing Carol loves this country very deeply. And so are we really a nation that wants to attack that? Because that's a question of who we are as a country and what are our values. You lived through the era where Republicans were even using language like a pathway to legal status, a pathway to citizenship.
Reagan was for amnesty.
Was for amnesty. I mean,
that was all to the right of where Reagan, the so-called Republican icon, was when he was for amnesty.
Sure, and that feels so quaint and remote now, but how are we now in a period where a pathway to legal status for someone like Carol or anyone else is being lost? And what I have found in my conversations, obviously, with voters, it's interesting. For a cycle or two, we really hit the threads of xenophobia. Is this xenophobic? Is it anti-immigrant? Yeah, I think it is. But the conversations I think that are more effective in this moment when we're seeing the likes of Carol are in two spaces. It's the cruelty. It's the cruelty. People understand cruelty. People understand when you're picking up the daughter, you're picking up Carol, you're picking up the person going to take out their trash. Someone doesn't have the opportunity to have due process. They're just getting removed. That's cruel. And people understand that. Even people who voted, even immigrants who voted for Donald Trump, understand cruelty is not what they signed up for. And the other effective language is around broken promises. It's broken promises. When the Venezuelan American community has TPS revoked, all of a sudden it was, wait, I didn't think you were going to do that for us. I thought you were talking about somebody else. You're talking about me and my family. You're talking about our neighborhood. And so maybe Donald Trump gets away with this. Maybe he does. Maybe the Republican governors around the state get away with this. But ultimately, we're holding a mirror up to ourselves. Are our politics going to be different this cycle or not? I don't know.
I want to tell our viewers that Carol and her lawyer will be on our air in the next hour with Ari Melber. Alan Orr and Christy Greenberg, thank you both for starting us off this hour on this story.